This is a complete description of the residence desire to be searched, including the curtilage attached thereof. Being the premises occupied or under the control of Jeffrey Epstein, white male, date of birth 1/2053. Okay, this is your copy. Okay. When we are concluded, I will leave a list of what items were taken.
7 months into the case, detectives executed the search warrant at Mr. Epstein's residence.
They opened the doors and went up the winding staircase into his ornate and bizarre world. Pictures of young kids, half naked, nudes everywhere. One of the police officers who saw it said that it was just really weird. Detectives also discovered a very bizarre steam room and massage room set up. They actually found some computers and equipment remained in the house, but police suspected most of Epstein's computer hard drives, surveillance cameras, and videos had already been taken out of the house.
There was space on a desk where wires were hanging, but there was no computer. At that point, it was fairly clear to us that Mr. Epstein knew that he was under investigation. Epstein had been tipped off. After the search warrant, it was disappointing to realize that Epstein's house had been cleaned up. There were a lot of things that had been removed, but there was still plenty of evidence that was left. I think the most useful thing that we learned was that the victims' accounts, detailed descriptions of Mr. Epstein's home, where rooms were located, the configuration of the home, validated what they had told us. There were memo pads of phone calls that we seized that included contact information for some of the victims and for some of the adult females that had been used to identify and recruit the victims. So that was productive for us as well.
The message pads that were taken from the investigation that the Palm Beach Police Department did, they're very revealing. Individuals who were being called or calling back in to come over for these sexual massages. For example, one has a redaction on it, meaning it was a minor who was calling in, and it says she's wondering if 2:30 is okay, she needs to stay in school. I think I took this case much more seriously than other matters that I've handled, in the sense that it was very personal. I do have a daughter, I have children. I met with these victims. It was very personal, the abuse that they suffered. I won't stop until the people who victimized these individuals are held accountable. The age of consent in Florida is 18. It does vary state to state, and in New York, for example, it's 17. But this really isn't a case about consent. The point of these cases is that there was no consent here.
7 months into the investigation, we were all extremely frustrated at the difficulty of this case. We applied whatever resources were necessary to do the best job to quickly be able to reach the point that we could apply for arrest warrants.
Detectives that I talked to said that they were tiptoeing, they were acting a little cautiously because they knew there'd be blowback, but also they were running into resistance even among their own colleagues. They knew that there were people who would protect any number of the residents on the island. And so to go into a case like this, you had to walk gingerly, you had to make sure that you held your information closely, and you had to be absolutely sure that you were right.
We found that the victims ran the entire gamut, from those that were thankful that we contacted them, others who said that they were in love with Jeffrey Epstein and they were going to get married to Jeffrey Epstein. Some victims that we contacted that had gone on to college, who slammed the door in the face of detectives. We were very surprised to learn these criminal activities had gone on for a fairly long period of time, many years prior to the investigation.
すごいよね、実際。ネトリのドキュメンタリーすごいよ、マジ。予想以上にすげえことやってるわ。
My name is Virginia Giuffre. When I was 16, I got a summer job at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. I was working there as a locker room attendant in the spa area. At the time, I really wanted to become a massage therapist. And not very long into working at Mar-a-Lago, did a English lady come up to me. She introduced herself as Ghislaine Maxwell. She was beautiful, she looked educated, she was nice. She said, "Oh, that's interesting, you're reading a book about massage therapy." And she said, "You know, I actually know this guy who's looking for a traveling masseuse. You know, if you want, you can come by this afternoon after work and you can come meet him." I finished work around 5, and I pull up at this huge house, this big mansion. And Ghislaine answers the door. I walk through the door, and she's leading me up the staircase, and I'm looking around. You know, there's photographs everywhere of important people. I I could tell that, this guy has some friends in high places. And then we go into the massage room, and there's this massage bed with a naked man laying on top of it, face down. To me, this is, I guess, walking into a world that I didn't understand, but I guess I'm going to learn. Gillen shows me, put your lotion here on your hands, and then we did his feet, his calves, his back. While the massage was going on, they asked me questions about my life. So who are you? What school do you go to? Tell me about yourself. And that's when I felt like I should open up and tell them, how much this opportunity means to me. My home life started out very hard from a very young age. I'd been a runaway and lived on the streets. I've been abused. I felt like it was okay to tell them about my past. And then he turned over. They asked me to please take off my clothes. Gillen started taking off her clothes. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going to happen if I said no. I didn't know what was going to happen if I screamed. I did what they said. Gillen was behind and touching me. It went from oral sex to get on top. Still to this day, I don't know how it went from something real to something perverted like that so quickly. Afterwards, they said the interview went great. You're going to come back tomorrow. And I did. I was abused plenty of times before Epstein had done what he did to me. I had no self-esteem. I was scared that my life was going to be worthless. I was the perfect victim for them. One thing that Epstein loved me for was that I never really asked too many questions. I escalated up the ladder very quickly with Epstein. I did whatever he needed. Put his socks on for him before bed, make sure what he needed sexually happened. I had to serve him all the time. They told me, you're going to do so well. You're going to travel the world. You're going to meet people that you'd never think you'd meet. We're going to put you in circles that you would never even understand. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had a great way of normalizing the abuse that was going on. They kind of made it feel like we were in this really deranged family. We would sit back and we would watch movies together. We would go diving together. We would go hiking together. We would go on forerunners together. We would do so many cool activities like that together. They kept saying, we will get you educated. You will become a real massage therapist one day. But under the premise that afterwards, you're back to the abuse. And unfortunately, I didn't see my life getting any better. So I stayed. It was like I am now a slave to these people. And then I was trafficked. I was lent out to all of their friends. They were politicians. They were businessmen. They were powerful people. It made me think that if I had run and caused a ruckus, the police wouldn't have believed me. They wouldn't have done anything about it. And Jeffrey and Gillen could have hurt me really bad then. He did say, people owe me favors. I can get away with this. I will never get caught. I own the Palm Beach Police Department.
Jeffrey Epstein fits into that pattern of thinking that he's above the law, that he can do what he feels like doing. But the life of privilege and power that Epstein led is a far, far cry from the way he was brought up. Epstein was born and raised in Coney Island, New York, which is very middle class, lower middle class. Epstein was a very good student in high school. He was a bright guy. He skipped a couple of grades in high school, graduated in 1969.
What college did you attend?
Cooper Union.
And did you get a degree from Cooper Union?
No, sir.
How many years were you in college?
I believe 2.
What'd you study?
Physics.
But isn't it true that you were a teacher at the Dalton School in New York after college?
The first mystery is, how could Epstein get a job teaching at Dalton without a college degree? This was probably the start of Epstein's lifelong pattern of getting away with things that most people can't.
すごいよね。全く
In 1976, Ace Greenberg was running Bear Stearns. One day, I was sitting in my office, and Ace Greenberg called me to say that a trustee of the Dalton School had a young professor, Jeff Epstein, who wanted to come to Wall Street, and Ace asked if I would interview him.
関係ないと思うけどね。
Epstein was well known as a good teacher and somewhat of a ladies' man, which didn't resonate at the time. After grilling Jeffrey a few times, I hired him to develop and market our quantitative analyses for options. He was terrific at it. Epstein was very quick-witted. When something arose that he might not have been able to predict, he dealt with it in an impressive fashion. That's a trait of an effective salesperson. I was favorably impressed that he could do the work. But this, I think, was one of my important mistakes in my career. Epstein had been working for me perhaps 2 months. The head of personnel called me. He said, "Are you sitting down?" Jeffrey Epstein lied on his resume about his education. None of his colleges had ever heard of him. I was stunned. I hired a liar. Even worse, he was dating Ace's daughter. I went to Ace Greenberg. I wasn't sure how he would want me to proceed. And Ace said, treat him like anybody else. I was
やるた
prepared
め
to
に
fire
見て
him.
るからもうどう
And
で
this is
もない
where
よ
his sales skills really
So-
resonated. When I
あ
told him he
んま
lied,
もののけ姫ってあれぐらいだよ。予告
he
編
just said, I knew I couldn't get
予
a
告
job
編
teaching
より
in
や
a
ば
high
い
quality
映画。
school
普通
if
予
I
告
didn't have good
の
educational
30秒なの。
credentials. So I wanted to give him a chance. I said, why didn't you tell us the truth? And he said, well, I was afraid the Dalton school would hear about it and there would be
告
problems.
発じゃ
He
ん
said, I
なん
wanted
告
to.
発だよ。
And he did it in a way that was
世
very
界エク
convincing.
スタイン事件だよ。
He disarmed me. And I
モロ
thought,
だ
do
か
I
ら
want to
さ
play God and throw him in the street?
ナ
Maybe
ンコパー
destroy
ティー
his
の話だよ
potential. Today I wish I had.
ただ綺麗だからさキューブ
He
ッ
had
ト
done
が
well
ハイエ
enough
ンド
that
で
they made him a limited partner. But then a few years after
告
that, I heard he'd been
発だ
fired
と
for
ね
breaking some rules.
ガーシーみたいな
I
感じに
deeply
なっちゃう
regret giving
本
Epstein
当
a
に
second
美し
chance.
いちゃんと
That
金か
was
けてる
my tragedy.
てか当時のギネス記録の一番お金かかってるよトム・クルーズだってな1年半だっけ
Most of the victims did not want to prosecute when we first contacted them. So once we had 4 or 5 victims who were cooperative, we presented applications for arrest warrants to the state attorney's office. From the time I first became police chief, I had an excellent relationship with the state attorney, Barry Krischer. The first time that I talked about the case against Epstein with him, I explained that we had about 40-some victims who were in their teens, early teens in some cases, who had sex with an adult male in his 50s, saying, Jeffrey Epstein, and he remarked, we'll put him away for the rest of his life. This will be an easy case.
Jeffrey Epstein, both through his money and his connections, was able to assemble an extraordinary dream team of at least 8 defense lawyers who were known throughout the country and throughout their industry as the absolute best. From Clinton impeachment lawyer Kenneth Starr, the top defense lawyers of South Florida, people like Roy Black, New Yorkers like Jay Lefkowitz and Gerald Lefcourt, to Harvard Law School professor Alan Dershowitz.
I was born to be a criminal defense lawyer. If you want to be a defense attorney, you can't be concerned about what people think of you. So I did represent Klaus von Bülow, O.J. Simpson, and Mike Tyson, and Leona Helmsley, and Patricia Hearst, and so many other people. My relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was academic and lawyer-client. But it was a close academic friendship. For example, when I would write books, I would only send them to a handful of people. He was one of them because he would seriously read every word I wrote, and he would have comments and criticisms. Jeffrey Epstein called me, I think, the day he got the first indications. And the first indications were merely that 1 or 2 of the women may have been 17 and may have lied about their age and given him false documentation. He asked me if I would help represent him. And I said I couldn't represent him myself. I'm not a member of the Florida bar. But that I would help him put together a legal team. And I did.
Detectives quickly learned that Epstein was onto them and that he was organizing a defense, and in fact, he was organizing an offense. Jeffrey Epstein's attorneys were looking into what the detectives were doing, who they were, what their pasts were, whether there were any peccadillos that would make them vulnerable to attack.
There was surveillance of me 4 months, around the clock, surveillance of Detective Ricari around the clock, picking up of his trash at his home and my trash. And the reason that it happened to the degree that it did is because Mr. Epstein had the resources to do that. In fact, we found private investigators going through the trash at the police station. So we stopped putting the reports in the computer and actually had them kept separately.
A few months after Chief Michael Ryder hands over the evidence to his close friend, Barry Krischer, Ryder noticed an alarming difference in Krischer's attitude towards Epstein. Krischer had all but said to his friend, Chief Michael Ryder, we're going to string him up. Looked like he had a really solid case. And then suddenly the teeth seemed to go out of the investigation, at least on the side of the state attorney who's supposed to be prosecuting this.
I had been speaking with Mr. Krischer along the way, and the state attorney's office started saying, look, these victims will not make good witnesses. Yes, these victims, most of them, received financial compensation for the sexual contact with Mr. Epstein, but no child can consent to have sex with an adult. But we were never able to really convince the prosecutors that that didn't matter.
In a release, high-powered local attorney Jack Goldberger, Epstein's attorney, emphasized the grand jury in this questioned the credibility of the girls and therefore limited their charges simply to solicitation of prostitution. Epstein is out on bond.
明らかになんかおかしいな力が働く全然起訴されないし全然
I've been a
捕ま
reporter
っ
at
ても
Palm Beach
ない
Post for about 16 years. I think nobody knew anything until 2006, and then it just exploded. Epstein's attorneys went after the victims viciously. I mean, their depositions that I've read were just, hideous. I remember one where he asked one of the young girls, is it true you've had 3 abortions? And then they asked the girl, well, what's worse, having 3 abortions or giving sexual massages to Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, it was just brutal what they did to these women.
You must bring out all the negatives. You have to present the full picture. Their credibility may be subject to question because of their backgrounds, but it has nothing to do with blaming them. It's the role of the defense attorney to raise questions about the credibility of any witnesses. We don't look at what's good for victims. We don't look at anything except what's good for our client ethically and legally.
I've been here with a TV station here in Palm Beach County for almost 23 years now. Jeffrey Epstein's story is as big as it gets. So when the story broke, we started realizing the gravity of a Palm Beach billionaire and the accusations that we were starting to hear. We were quickly on the air with this story, but Epstein's team wanted this to go away. There were weekly phone calls to reporters with threats to make the story go away. You don't want to do this. You shouldn't be looking into this. And it was mystifying to the Palm Beach Police Department because they had all this evidence.
Palm Beach police think prostitution charges brought against billionaire socialite Jeffrey Epstein don't go far enough. Investigators think prosecutors should have gone after Epstein on charges of unlawful sex with a minor. So why didn't they?
We were all extremely frustrated. Once we knew that the one charge was going to be the extent of the state's prosecution, I wrote the parents of all the victims and told them that I did not feel that justice was sufficiently served and that I was referring the case to the FBI.
It's highly unusual for a police chief to sidestep the state attorney's office and go directly to the feds and ask and demand an investigation. I don't know that I've ever heard of that. And I think, that's one of the many, many, many odd things about this case.
Any investigator or investigation, the first thing you're going to do is look back in time and see, has this happened before? Are there other claims? Are there other victims? The FBI actually found two women who had accused Epstein a decade earlier, in 1996. Maria Farmer, an artist, and her younger sister Annie.
In 1996, following the assault by Jeffrey and Ghislaine, I came back to New York, and then I found out that they knew that I reported them to the FBI. Ghislaine called and said she was going to burn all my art and burn my career and destroy it. She was entirely socially connected, and that I was screwed. She told me I needed to watch my back, that I know you like to go running on the West Side Highway, and that's not going to be a safe place for you anymore because there are a lot of ways to die on the West Side Highway. From that point on, over many years, I would move, I would relocate, and a couple of months would go by, and I would be moving in, and Ghislaine would call me. She would say she knew where I lived. She would say that same kinds of veiled threats, like, you're not safe where you are. You might want to check over your shoulder. Finally, in 2006, I was living in the mountains of North Carolina. I was hiding. I had changed my name. I had an alias. And I get a knock on the door, and it's this man and this woman, and they show me their badge, their FBI, and this woman who said, this is about your 1996 FBI report, and we're following up because we're going to get him. We're going to get them. The FBI came and they interviewed me and they interviewed my sister and we told them our stories. And so we just thought, oh my gosh, they're really, they're doing a thorough job. They're looking at people in other places. They're recognizing that this is a more systemic issue, and they are, he's going to be held accountable.
I talked to the FBI and they're like, we're here to save you. And they assured me that they were going to protect me and that they needed me to tell them everything that happened. And they would help as many victims as they can.
I think a lot of the families, when they came to learn what had happened to their daughters, reached out to attorneys to try to help them navigate the circumstance, because obviously there was a criminal aspect to it, there was a civil aspect to it, and they were also facing somebody who was incredibly powerful, incredibly wealthy, incredibly intimidating, so they needed lawyers to help them through that process.
The first time I ever heard Jeffrey Epstein's name was when I had my own law firm. It's dedicated to representing crime victims in civil cases. A friend of mine from Jacksonville, who was also a lawyer, he called me and said that he had received a call from a girl, and that was Courtney Wild. Courtney came to my office. Then she told me how she went into his house, told me what happened there.
I was 14 when I was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein. It was 8th grade summer, going from 8th grade to high school. From 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I was a straight A student. I never even got a B. I played the trumpet. I was captain of the cheerleading squad. But then from 8th grade to 9th grade, things fell apart for me and my family. Just from my mom's addiction. She was sick, battling her own demons, wasn't really able to care for me. And I was basically homeless and living at a friend's house and stuff like that. When I first went to Jeffrey's, I really was expecting I was going to make easy money doing this guy a massage. And that situation escalated to him molesting me. It happened so quick. Where it's like, what just happened? But being vulnerable at 14 years old and trying to handle life on my own, it was just overwhelming. So I did continue to go back to Jeffrey's. He made me feel like, basically I was lucky to be in his presence. It was just a glorified manipulation thing he had going on that worked. It was maybe the second time I went to him or the third. He asked me, do I have any friends? Can I bring anybody? And he would give me $200 and the person $200. In my time frame of going for 3 to 4 years, I at least brought about 40 to 60 girls. I know that this is wrong, this is crazy, but I just became okay with that because of what he offered me. He offered me cash, he offered me a way so I could eat and pay my bills, and he offered me something that nobody else did. I felt like he was my lifeline. So in the beginning of the investigation, when the police were reaching out to me, I was confused. I felt like I had this painting of Jeffrey, that he was this awesome man, that he actually saved my life in a sense, that I was very lucky to ever be introduced to him. But then I seen the police reports of girls that I had brought to Jeffrey's, close friends, and that made me have the change of heart. The emotions come over of like guilt and shame and disgust. It was traumatic. That's when I started saying, okay, this isn't right. Something needs to happen about this. So I find Brad Edwards, my attorney.
I told her, you don't really have much to worry about. This is somebody who is not ever going to be free again. And she said, but I don't think that you understand the level of power he has. It's just unheard of. It's just an unbelievable scheme to have kept going for that long of a period of time. I've never heard anything like this where somebody was able to set up basically a pyramid scheme, a molestation pyramid scheme. Hey, do you have the victim chart? The chart that we created? This is when we were first trying to map out the case. We had to prove that this pyramid of underage girls in Palm Beach was true. It didn't start from just a random underage girl walking into the house. Ghislaine Maxwell was one of the recruiters of the underage girls for Jeffrey Epstein. The other recruiters that were identified were Sarah Kellen, Nadia Marcinkova, Adriana Muchenska, and we just started tracking if this person, which name is not identified right now, was an underage girl, who did you bring? And then from that person, we would bridge down, how many did you bring? And she would name the other 5 or 6 people. This was something that we assembled in about 30 days and realized that this chart could go off like a spider web for 5 times as big as this chart.
So at the top of the pyramid scheme was Ghislaine Maxwell, who was really Epstein's right-hand person with helping to recruit these individuals for sexual abuse.
Jeffrey and Ghislaine met in New York. Jeffrey Epstein's really an introvert. Ghislaine is a much more charming person than Jeffrey is. She's an extrovert. I think he revels in being this man of mystery who almost can't be bothered to dress properly, can't be bothered to go to restaurants. And he likes the sort of intrigue that creates about him. Ghislaine is a very engaging person. She's extremely charismatic and bubbly. Her father, Robert Maxwell, had been an incredibly big figure in England. He was a big newspaper publisher. In fact, he'd been something of a con man and a fraudster, but he'd lived a huge life. When Ghislaine came to New York, her whole world had fallen apart. Her father, who she was incredibly attached to, had died in very murky circumstances, and also his entire reputation had been shattered. Jeffrey, in a way, felt like a safe haven for her. Here was another very rich man to sort of replace her father.
ここで繋がっちゃった。イギリス版のヒエダとかナベツネみたいなそういう感じです。陰謀論じゃない。
I've been covering Wall Street since at least 1991. Jeffrey Epstein was always someone whose name popped up, but couldn't really nail it down. He was a cipher. People I know on Wall Street leave trails. His trail was elusive. So it was just sort of odd that he was this guy that people talked about a lot that didn't have much of a footprint in the investment world. That's the mystery of Jeffrey Epstein. How did he make money?
I deeply regret that I met Jeffrey Epstein, who is somebody that has haunted me for over 30 years. Without me, he wouldn't be the billionaire he is today, and these poor girls would not be raped. And I'm here for redemption and to tell the story to the public. I met Jeff Epstein in the 80s after he was thrown out of Bear Stearns. I was the CEO of Towers Financial Corporation.
Steve Hoffenberg and Jeffrey were both self-made guys, but when Jeffrey met him, Hoffenberg was the mogul. He was the one flying around in private planes. He was the one with the wealth.
The CEO of a very large company who had employed Jeffrey Epstein in Europe called me and said, this is a brilliant man that we'd like you to interview for North America because he has credentials on Wall Street and he's loaded with energy, but his moral compass is upside down. Jeffrey Epstein had cheated and stolen money on his expense account. He definitely appealed to us because we were running a Ponzi scheme. and he understood Wall Street, and he could deliver substantial results in this criminal enterprise. So I interviewed Jeffrey Epstein, and he took control of the interview. He's got a gift that's extraordinary, where he controls the people he meets and manipulates them
これは
totally
やっぱ
with
社
his
風だから
charisma.
さ。ここがリクルートと違う。リクルートはやっぱ事業会社っぽいっていうか、本当に取るからさ、マーケットシェアと。
Jeffrey Epstein became my partner in crime, backing me up, leading the events, doing the crimes alongside of me daily. He took over the securities side, the fake assets side. He was manipulating the stock price and trading stock illegally.
People involved certainly remembered Jeffrey as being incredibly important in coming up with how the scheme would work. Then the law called up this massive scam.
I stood up, pled guilty, and accepted the responsibility. My sentence was for 20 years in federal prison. And I didn't turn evidence against him because Jeffrey Epstein told me he was a cooperating witness from the United States Department of Justice in the past, and he had traction with them. I believe that Jeffrey Epstein would have been able to discredit me and say he was the white knight and he was immaculate. And I knew that was his plan. You can't grasp the magnitude of this man's controlling effect. Jeffrey Epstein was able to control and manipulate people in an extreme method. That was typical Jeffrey Epstein.
It's very clear that that is Jeffrey's MO, is to hold things over people, hold their secrets over people. I suspect, there's a pattern here.
Jeffrey Epstein's methods started with Leslie Wexner. When Jeffrey Epstein sold his soul to Leslie Wexner for several $1 billion of investment.
Jeff Epstein met Les Wexner somewhere around 1986. This is Mr. Wexner's gatehouse. And beyond that gatehouse is a massive compound and the most expensive house in central Ohio.
Les Wexner started out in 1963 opening the women's fashion apparel shop, The Limited. Les bought various other brands, Abercrombie & Fitch and Victoria's Secret. Through all of that, became a multi-billionaire. At some point, Les Wexner provided a power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein over his financial affairs. I was astonished because Les Wexner is not the kind of guy who gives up control over anything.
Epstein was this Svengali figure that seems to have some unexplainable grip over this titan of industry. There were people in the late 80s, early 90s that referred to Epstein as the boyfriend.
Jeffrey Epstein was working with both of us at the same time. He was going to Ohio regularly on a jet that was provided to Jeffrey by Leslie Wexner. Epstein explained to me personally that he could control the emotions of Leslie Wexner easily because Leslie Wexner was fascinated and Wexner totally adored Epstein.
Do you consider yourself to be bisexual?
No.
In any event, you did develop a sexual relationship with Leslie Wexner at some point in time. Is that true? No.
Epstein told me how he planned to manipulate and control Leslie Wexner's fortune of billions of dollars so that Jeffrey Epstein could invest and make substantial income.
In 2019, Les Wexner revealed that he had cut ties with Epstein back in 2007. He said he discovered Epstein had stolen more than $46 million from him. He didn't explain why he didn't press charges.
Being taken advantage of by someone who was so sick, so cunning, so depraved, is something that I'm embarrassed that I was even close to.
アニメ会社はやっぱグッズ化。ガンダムの時代からでかいから。
I was a model and actress. When my friend said, this guy can get you in the Victoria's Secret catalog, I jumped. Jeffrey Epstein was staying at Shutters Hotel in Santa Monica, California. So I met him at his hotel room. He said he knows the owner of Victoria's Secret. So he started opening my portfolio of pictures. And then he said, let me see you in your bra and underwear. Then he started putting his hands on me and my hips and my butt. I really felt at the time that I was going to be raped or attacked. I ran out of the room crying. I drove to the Santa Monica Police Department to file a police report. I don't remember him ever being investigated. No one called me. He didn't get in trouble over it. It was like nothing really ever happened.
been a private investigator now for about 10 years, but I'd say 80% of my job is on the street finding information. When I started working on his case with Brad Edward, he told me that the FBI is doing a parallel case, but they really don't have much. It was just really going along slow. I'm a fan of the FBI. I work very closely with them. So I thought, okay, maybe I can speed it up for them. I had one daughter at the time when I started working the case was 21, and one daughter was 15. It didn't only make me think about my own daughters, it made me think about all the years I spent in law enforcement that I had to interview abused girls or girls that were victims of a pedophile, and how broken these girls became. These are the girls that I have been able to identify myself that were victims, 13 and 14 and 15 years old. And you see there's a volume of them. I started going to the depressed areas of West Palm Beach to these neighborhoods, and I would meet someone, or one of the girls that Brad was representing would know someone, give me a lead, and that's how I started finding girl after girl after girl. I think I must have found like 46 other girls that were assaulted. Some of the victims were very reluctant to talk to me, but I was at least able to get their names, who they were, and where they lived, which I later gave to the FBI.
Everybody feared him, and fear was his greatest asset. That's what gave him his power. So I took it upon myself as a civil prosecutor, and I served Jeffrey Epstein for a deposition and tried to achieve justice for the victims. Mr. Epstein, how long have you been sexually attracted to underage minor females?
Objection, harassing, argumentative. Are you kidding?
No, I mean, I don't feel like I'm divulging any secrets here, right?
Move to strike.
I was starting to really get on Jeffrey Epstein's nerves, for sure. There's no doubt. Was I trying to? I guess so.
Mr. Epstein, were you sexually abused as a minor?
Again?
Were you sexually abused as a minor?
You know, I'd like to respond to all your, if any questions seem to be relevant, but I would like to respond to any relevant question at this time. However, my attorneys have counseled me that I cannot provide answers to the questions relevant to this lawsuit today. I must accept their advice or risk losing my Sixth Amendment right to effective representation. Accordingly, then, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right to the United States Constitution.
Pretty soon, Epstein's investigators started conducting surveillance on Brad. They were trying to find out if they could catch Brad doing anything wrong after hours, during hours, and try to blackmail him. But then it became intimidation because they started surveilling Brad's house, where his wife and kids live.
When my wife noticed that somebody was following her, I thought, okay, it's just getting out of hand. That's now my family. He tried to intimidate me into just abandoning my clients, which I was never going to do. That was never going to happen.
They were investigating the victims as well. We had several victims report to us that people posing as law enforcement officers were contacting the victims and, in some cases, intimidating them.
I started noticing that there were cars that would sit at the end of my street. I had these people constantly watching me. So I called my attorney and I told him what was going on. Brad figured out that most of these vehicles were actually private investigators that were following and watching me.
While she was sleeping in her bed, Jeffrey Epstein's investigators set their car up across the street from her house and just shined their bright lights through her window all night.
So Brad sent Mike Fiston over. They had this private investigator war cameras against one another, recording each other.
When I showed up, he was still here. I took pictures of his car, and then I took pictures of him in his car. With me there, looking at him, he's still videotaping.
It was kind of scary. Mike, puts me in his car and he says, we're going to get out of here.
Don't follow her.
And he drove me hours down south and put me in a hotel where I hid and was basically just told your family's going to be safer if you're not home because they're not going to harass you now. Why do I have to make my family safe from somebody who should be sitting in jail?
This was a cooperative investigation between the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Although we were not an official partner to the investigation, they kept us informed. We cooperated. We introduced them to the victims that we knew of. We gave them all of the background information, what's written between the lines. It doesn't appear in a report.
The agent on the case, Kirkendall, is a great agent. And she put together this case against this pedophile that was going to put him in prison the rest of his life if he just gets convicted of one count.
The government had a plethora of information at their fingertips. They had 35 to 40 different victims that were willing to give testimony. They had information showing victims being transported across state lines, whether it be in private planes or on commercial flights. So they had a 53-page indictment prepared because they had just an immense amount of information that they could charge Epstein with.
I asked for an appointment with Alex Acosta. Alex Acosta at the time was the U.S. attorney. I met with him and his team in Mr. Acosta's office. I told them that I would like to know from them that they were going to prosecute this case and follow through with it and get justice for the victims. I left my meeting with Alex Acosta thinking that Jeffrey Epstein would go to jail for the rest of his life.
そういう学科なんだから、プロデューサー育てる、編集者とか。
The case had been turned over to the federal government for more than 2 years, but I hadn't heard anything.
評伝作家になっちゃってるでしょ、編集者だからさ。いや、絶対良くない。それはなんか書かせればいいって。だからそうやってプレイヤーになっちゃうわけよ、全部その問題ばっかりで。これが自分で会社作って僕みたいにね、ベンチャー作ったらさ、潰れるからさ、ダメだったら。サラリーマンとか公務員はそうじゃないじゃん。別に何も潰れやしないけど。で、豊かだった時代は良かった。
I call and speak with Marie Define of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and she confirmed that this is a massive case.
ネットフリックスだよね。ネットフリックス。いやもうネットフリックスだけは本当にちょうどアメリカ行った時使ってまさかこうなるとはだね。本当にまあでも
I started asking when she thought a trial was actually going to happen, and I remember her telling me that there's just a lot that I want to tell you, and I know that your heart's in the right place, and mine is too. There's a lot that I want to tell you, Brad, that I can't tell you. And that's when I started thinking something was going on.
Suddenly, when we'd call the FBI agents, they would tell us they were forbidden to talk to any representative of the Palm Beach Police Department about the case. It's the only time that ever happened in my 30 years as a law enforcement officer.
Epstein's personal 727 aircraft arrived at PBIA from Newark at 5 p.m. The investor, traveling with a small entourage, was met at the private Galaxy Aviation by a black Escalade and a driver. Sources tell News Channel 5 that Kenneth Starr, now a top lawyer in Los Angeles, will arrive here tomorrow morning.
The U.S. Attorney Acosta met with Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers. The next thing, not only was the indictment gone, the FBI case was stopped. So the FBI agents were shook up, very upset, and started voicing their opposition to what had occurred.
The FBI agent, Nesbitt Kuykendall, I was so impressed by her. She was very dedicated to the women in Florida. She called me really upset one day, and she said, Maria, I know you're hesitant about testifying because you're afraid, and I just want you to know I don't know if it'll even matter because things are really falling apart.
I contacted Kuykendall myself, and she was in tears. She was actually crying on the phone in tears that this happened. She felt so bad for these victims because she told these victims she's going to put this guy away. Nobody knows why U.S. Attorney Acosta shut this case down. To me, that's bullshit.
Merry Christmas. Jean Maxwell Denizel.
ビールって聞いて思い浮かぶ味ありますよね。でもそれだけじゃないんだな、ビールって。白ビールやもう一つの美味しいビールがまだ一番搾りたいの。
すごいお金かかるからね、制作委員会じゃないと。よっぽどね、なんかファウンダーとかでしかも売れるか分かんないからね。でやっぱ代理店が電波組。
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
アニメー
This
ショ
is
ンはさ
Jeffrey
すが
Epstein
に
in his
全
first
体が
deposition
入
in
ら
my
ないと
case.
宣伝できないか
I
ら。
represented the original girl that was brought to police and gave her story that started this investigation. Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis? I'd hired a psychologist to do a psychological profile on Jeffrey Epstein, what type of person he was, and what would actually get under his skin. What made him tick was that he was a narcissist. He had no ability to feel empathy and saw himself as the master of puppets, so to speak. Sir, one witness described your penis as oval-shaped and claimed when erect it was thick towards the bottom, but was thin and small towards the head portion, and called it egg-shaped. Those are not my words, I apologize. But as Mr. Creighton has stated, that this is a... I'm willing to... He tries at all times to be the master of his domain and in control of his world. As soon as he feels he's out of control, it's unsettling to him.
When we first turned the case over to the FBI, they identified additional victims, and early on, we in the Palm Beach Police Department helped them doing that. But after nearly 2 years, there was very little information flowing from the federal side back to us. In fact, they reminded us on several occasions that this was not a cooperative investigation, it was their investigation.
All of a sudden, I had gotten a tip that Jeffrey Epstein was going to be there at the courthouse, but we didn't know why. As I'm going through security, he was actually going through security with his lawyers at the same time, and they were kind of rushing him through security to get upstairs. The courtroom was packed. And obviously at that point, I started realizing that something was happening here that was bigger than just a routine hearing.
It was a very hush-hush hearing. It was, scheduled at the last minute, despite all the, the time that had elapsed.
There was a point where Mr. Epstein's lawyers then took a sidebar and went up and talked to the judge about something that the rest of the courtroom couldn't hear. He was ushered over to the bailiff where he was fingerprinted, and DNA swab was done, and he was then taken out of the room. Somehow, his lawyers had worked out a deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The whole thing was shocking.
No one told us in the Palm Beach Police Department that any of this was happening. Our lobby was full of the news media because they knew about it before we did.
2 years now after his arrest for soliciting prostitutes, Palm Beach billionaire Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty today. The guilty plea a deal in a years-long process that could have sent Epstein to jail for 15 years. He agreed to serve a total of 18 months in a Palm Beach detention facility.
It was outrageous. That's when we learned for the first time, there's not a deal about to happen. A deal actually already happened. It's already done. The case is over. And my clients are going, how is the case over when it hasn't started? This doesn't make any sense to me. I told him, none of it. What doesn't make sense to you right now also doesn't make sense to me. Alex Acosta, the acting U.S. attorney, should at least have to explain, why did you do what you did? And give us the real story. Whatever it is, just tell us why. Give me some explanation for why this fucking happened.
This Channel 5 story we're about is live today at the Palm Beach Police Department.
When a police chief here heard that Epstein would be charged with solicitation of prostitution, he thought that the charges ought to be much more serious. Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Ryder believed a strong case had been made that Epstein had sex with children.
It's the only case I was involved in my entire career that I felt as though I really could not protect the victims.
I've been working together with Brad Edwards on Epstein civil cases for over a decade. Jeffrey Epstein was given immunity from any other state charges and immunity from all federal charges, both for himself and for any of his named and unnamed co-conspirators. It is inexplicable to me that any prosecutor could ever have entered into this kind of plea deal. In 45 years of practice, I have never heard of anyone ever entering into a plea agreement that not only granted immunity to the target of an investigation, but handed out get out of jail free cards to every one of that person's co-conspirators, named and unnamed.
All unknown co-conspirators somehow also got immunity? There was no way that anybody could look at this and think this was okay.
The outcome of this case, whether people agree with it or disagree with it, doesn't require a conspiracy between government officials and wealthy people. Everything that we negotiated for had to be approved by Acosta, by the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division in Washington, by the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, ultimately by the Attorney General of the United States. This went through various levels. It was a very tough negotiation. Acosta mostly sat at the end of the table and asked hard questions. The issue was whether or not the federal government could make a case based on the evidence they had of the commission of a federal crime. And my job was to try to persuade them they could not make that case.
Jeffrey Epstein and his team was just this huge train of money, power, influence that was just barreling down on the state's attorney's office, the U.S. attorney's office, just trying to get their way and eventually getting their way.
In the end, they decided that they'd be better off getting a bird in the hand versus two in the bush, and they agreed to have him plead guilty to state charges, get a sentence, and then make massive compensation to the alleged victims. I can tell you one interesting thing at the end. Jeffrey Epstein didn't think we made a very good deal. He was pretty upset with us. He thought he could have done better.
Hi, Jeffrey, it's George Rush. George, how are you? Good. Do you want to say anything just about the way your agreement has been characterized as a secret backroom sweetheart deal that somehow, through the political connections of your lawyers, that they obtained it?
It's all total bullshit. On closer examination, you'll find my penalty was harsher, not less, harsher than anyone else has ever been charged with solicitation of prostitution. Don't bring anybody into my house. First of all, I never left my house.
なんか面白いよね。だって多分 YouTube とかずっと見てる人はネトウリは全然見ないでしょ。ちょこっと見るから。YouTube は多分ダメだと思う。10人ぐらい。
That's nothing to do with minors. Simply solicitation of prostitution. The other charge that related to a minor was procuring a minor for engaging in prostitution. So that was the only two. None of those, neither of the charges or any allegation alleged sexual intercourse of any time or any type. This third charge is simply a procurement charge. It has nothing to do with sex. It's procurement for prostitution. Even up until 6 months ago, soliciting a 6-year-old prostitute was a Class D misdemeanor. This was a fine of $100, similar to jaywalking.
They
labeled us as underage prostitutes. And it's embarrassing to be identified as that. It's embarrassing, it's hurtful, it's all kinds of things.
These girls were not prostitutes. These girls were middle school and high school kids, children. The victims are left beaten and destroyed and with no answers.
I was shocked when I read that there was a plea deal. I didn't know you could make a deal with the government and, get a lesser sentence just based upon how much power and money you have.
Justice wasn't served. Everybody looked the other way. And we find out that what the government did was they kept the victims in the dark, so we didn't have our day in court. So yeah, I was sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein, but I was re-victimized by the same government that's supposed to protect us. They muted our voices. So I was angry. I'm still very angry.
I think that this is common for people like Jeff. I think that they often don't have to face the consequences for their actions. I just wanted Jeff to be prosecuted. I wanted him to not be able to dig his way out of it with money. And then I found out that this deal was made where the records were sealed and my ability to do anything criminally against him was gone. I was really upset about it. I was mad about it and I didn't know where to go from there.
Almost immediately after, the non-prosecution agreement was secretly signed between Jeffrey Epstein and the government. I tell all of my clients, I have to fight this. And the best thing that I can do is to enforce your rights under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which ensures that victims in criminal cases have certain basic rights, which include the right to confer with the prosecutor on the case before there's a resolution of the case. We had to file a lawsuit.
If a court says these victims were entitled to be heard, there may be a new hearing in front of a federal judge where these victims have a right to express their opposition to this deal. And a judge could decide, Jeffrey Epstein, you did enter into a contract that was illegal from the outset. It is going to be voided. You have no immunity. The federal government has the right to prosecute you and the right to prosecute your co-conspirators.
One of the next things that we did was we requested all of the email correspondence between the U.S. Attorney's Office and Jeffrey Epstein to support our allegation that there was this concerted effort to arrive at a secret deal without the victims knowing.
There were so many unusual occurrences that went on in connection with the negotiation of this non-prosecution agreement. There were hundreds of email communications that got exchanged.
We found out Marie Villafana was sending emails back and forth to Jeffrey's lawyers asking them if they wanted to make any changes. I mean, at one point in her emails, she's telling Jeffrey's lawyers, don't email me at the office anymore. Here's my Gmail. Email me at my Gmail.
Mr. Acosta holds some meetings outside the U.S. Attorney's Office, outside lawyers' offices, in a room at the Marriott Hotel that were clearly intended to preserve the secrecy of the negotiations that were going on.
If any of the victims knew what was going on in this conspiracy between Jeffrey Epstein and the government, they could have blown the whole thing up. Before the plea deal, I think the focus was really on Florida. They didn't really realize that it expanded with victims being trafficked and traveled and lent out around the country and around the world.
I'm reading from the complaint filed by Virginia Roberts against you. Isn't it true, sir, that a friend of yours sent you 3 12-year-old females for you to sexually abuse on one of your birthdays?
Form argumentative, harassing, and irrelevant to this lawsuit. But is you saying it's part of the lawsuit?
Yeah, I'll read it directly.
It was Jeffrey's birthday one year. I don't remember what year it was, but I would say it's a good year into our relationship or knowing each other. And he was laughing about the fact that his friend sent him 3 12-year-old girls that he had purchased from their parents.
On one of defendant Epstein's birthdays, a friend of defendant Epstein sent him 3 12-year-old girls from France who spoke no English for defendant to sexually exploit and abuse. After doing so, they were sent back to France the next day. Isn't that true?
Once again, I'm going to move to strike. Irrelevant, argumentative, harassing. I would like to answer that question. I really would. However, today, my attorneys have told me I have to assert my 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution.
You're invoking your 5th Amendment rights to each of these questions because you know that your answers will incriminate you and you feel that they will result in you being prosecuted for these crimes. Remember,
objection, argumentative, harassing.
いや、決して映画俳優をバカにしないで、こう面白く。
No, in fact, the Supreme Court recently said that the 5th Amendment right is there to protect
面白くない小バカに、本当に小バカにされることなんです、サッカー選手でも。顔いじりとか、それ下品っていうか、サッカー選手もキャリア、人生かけてやってるからさ、芸人と一緒だよ。
I love it here in Spain because it's so far away. Jeffrey Epstein could never find me here.
サッカー選手はきついよね、だって。数ぐ
My
ら
name
い
is
で。
Sarah Ransom. In 2006, I was sexually trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. I just turned 22 when I decided to go to New York. New York's where everyone's dreams come true. I packed my bags, really excited, and I landed in New York on the 1st of September. However, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have that much money. I was there for about 2 weeks, and one night I went to a club called Quo, and I met this girl, Natalia Malyshev. She immediately befriended me. She became like my instant best friend. She said that she knew this amazing guy. He was a philanthropist. This guy genuinely is a really kind guy, and you know, whatever my dream is, he can make it come true. Natalia said this guy would really like to meet you. We went to the cinema. It was Jeffrey, of course. He was charming, charismatic, friendly, caring. He actually listened to me. And then I get a call, like I think it was the next day or like 2 days after. It was Natalia going, "You'll never believe it. Jeffrey really thought you were cool. This guy wanted to help me out, pay for my education. He was going to get me into the Fashion Institute of Technology." Natalia said he's got this private island, and we're going on this private plane, and it's amazing. It's like a tropical paradise, and I'm like down for going to a private island on a private plane. It was on that first plane journey that something peculiar happened. Jeffrey started having hardcore sex in front of everybody with another girl. And everyone else was sort of pretending to be asleep and ignoring it. And I just found it really odd that no one was saying or reacting. So I just pretended to sort of nod off. I didn't know where to look. It was traumatizing. It's still a very vivid memory for me. And I should have known then. I should have trusted my instincts, but I didn't.
The island is approximately 75 acres. From St. Thomas, it's about a 10-minute ride by passenger boat out to the island. This is Mr. Epstein's principal residence, which is the island of Little St. James. Mr. Epstein built little cabanas and beach houses all across the island. The blue roof that is closest to the water was Mr. Epstein's personal residence. And the main house and the guest house, that's where the guests would stay. He's not representative of the people of the Virgin Islands, I can tell you that. But being on an island by yourself, I guess he felt he could do whatever he wanted.
The island, that was one of Jeffrey's favorite places to go because it was so isolated. There's no doubt that it was beautiful. It has a nickname, the Pedophile Island, but that wasn't the nickname Jeffrey gave it. It was Little St. Jeff's. That was his nickname for it. But it really is Orgy Island because that's what happened there. That was what that island meant to me.
I started working on the island in 1999 and worked until either the end of 2005 or the start of 2006. I was there for maintenance on Jeffrey Epstein's telecommunications and data equipment. We wanted a private cellular network. Privacy was very important to Jeffrey Epstein. I was on the island probably 100 times. I was ultimately in every single building that existed on the island at that time. And I would say every other month I would see guests on the island, and the guests almost always included young girls. One time I went to the grotto, a little beach as if it was a coin, and when I walked down, there was a gentleman who was not Jeffrey, and 3 girls. The 3 girls were topless. The gentleman was nude. I left immediately. Sometimes there were other people on the island that were important people. I saw Alan Dershowitz on the island. It was more of a business meeting another time. I saw Dopin sitting with Jeffrey on the living room porch area, which was Jeffrey's favorite spot. I saw no other guests there at that time at all. I just said, hey, wow, Jeffrey sitting with Dopin.
Not all the men took part. I have, seen people on the island that came for a lunch or a dinner and they didn't stay very long.
Jeffrey hung out with a lot of powerful and well-known figures, both politically and financially, and British royalty. Probably around 2004, I saw Prince Andrew. He was at the pool. He was with, at that time, an unknown girl to me. She was young. She didn't have any time. They were engaged in foreplay. He was grabbing her and grinding against her. You tell yourself that you didn't know for sure, and you never really saw anything. But that's just all rationalization. Jeffrey Epstein, he was a guy that concealed his deviance very well, but he didn't conceal it that well. One day, cool guys on the island when I get there said, why are you doing this? I said, I don't know. The money. And he said, do you have any children? And I said, yeah, I have 2 daughters, 13 and 15. And he said, would you let your daughters come to the island? And when he said that, I realized I wouldn't let my 2 children within 5 miles of that man. And I quit the next day. I don't believe Jeffrey Epstein ever regretted a single thing he did in his life. I think that he's one of those kinds of sociopaths that could afford to live out his perversions in any way that he wanted.
At the US Virgin Islands, you've got authorities going, hello, Mr. Epstein, nice to see you again, welcoming you at the airport, as if he's some sort of celebrity, with about 5 girls trailing behind, and no one said anything. And I think that they knew The airport staff knew, the flight controls knew, the pilots knew, the landing guys knew, the guys that are even taking the luggage off knew. They all knew. From the very first day that I arrived on the island, the abuse started. Natalia called me and said that he wanted to see me in his room. And there was this massage table. And then I was asked to go on the table. And he just raped me. It was like lying on a surgeon's table and someone doing things to you that you have no control over. You're powerless. I was trapped from the very first day. I think I was in such shock because I think the more he saw you being damaged, the more he enjoyed it, the more it excited him. This area here reminds me of the evening when I tried to escape the island after I'd been raped 3 times that day. You do things. He did things that no man should ever do. And he did it all the time. And you know, that day I just had enough. My plan was just to swim away. And I specifically went to a remote part of the island. Before I even gathered my thoughts as to how I was going to climb down, get into the ocean, swim away, Jeffrey Epstein found me almost immediately. He knew exactly where I was, the location. And I knew then that I was being filmed. I was being watched 24/7. There were cameras all over the island. And he got me back.
Jeffrey's Island. It's like smoke and mirrors. Some really bad stuff happened there.
I'm Shantae Davies, and I first met Jeffrey Epstein at 21 years old. I worked for Jeffrey as a professional masseuse. It was the end of 2001 when they said, we're flying to Jeffrey's Island. Here I was going to this private island and in the Caribbean, and just all this was just so foreign to me that I just, I started to get very excited because I was starting to really see the perks of working for them. They showed me around the island, the various villas and where I was staying. So after dinner that night, I went back to my room, and then Sarah Kellen, their assistant, came knocking on my door and said, Jeffrey's ready for his massage now. It started to feel like this is not okay. This isn't going somewhere good. I began the massage like I always did, and then he flipped around and he threw me on the bed by holding my wrists together and raped me. He jumped off the bed and got in the shower, and I just jumped off the bed also and ran out of the door and ran all the way back to my villa. I left my shoes behind and was barefoot running back, and by the time I got back to my own villa, my feet were a bloody mess. And then I just cried myself to sleep that night and woke up the next day and tried to pretend like it didn't happen. Did I resist? Absolutely. Did I say no? Yes, I did. Did I fight? No, I didn't. I was terrified. I was isolated on a private island in the middle of nowhere, and just didn't, just let it happen.
Jeffrey Epstein went to jail just before 10 this morning. He pleaded guilty in open court. He agreed to serve a total of 18 months in the Palm Beach detention facility.
It was negotiated between the federal government and the state that Mr. Epstein would serve his time at a county jail, which was ours. Mr. Epstein stayed in T-dorm, which is located where my finger is pointing.
Describing this as a jail sentence is grossly misleading. He served it in a private wing of the jail.
His cell door was left open. He was provided food that other people didn't get to eat. He was provided a TV room. He got to meet with his lawyers almost around the clock when he was at the jail facility.
Mr. Epstein was given work release that he qualified for immediately upon his entry.
Are you released from jail at some time? Do you have to report back to jail on a daily basis?
Yes, I report back to jail at 8 p.m.
Every single day?
Yes, sir.
And is it 7 days a week that you're out on work release?
No, sir.
How many days a week are you out on work release?
6.
And of those 6 days, how many hours per day are you out on work release?
12.
For sex offenders to be on work release makes no sense to me.
Every other inmate would be given the same privileges if they met the parameters. Mr. Epstein had to file for a work permit application, and that's what I have in my hand. Participants shall not engage in or have contact with any person that's engaged in illegal activities. Part of the agreement was an off-duty deputy that he would be responsible for the salaries of, that would be with him the entire time at his office. It was approximately $42 an hour for a deputy to be with him. So that's 12 hours per day. Here are the payments that were made by Epstein with a total of $128,136.
at the office. He was able to ask other females to send him photographs. He was able to fly girls in. He was able to engage in sexual acts. We were given Mr. Epstein under conditions that we were not used to. And we did the very best we could under the parameters that we had.
It's hard to decide which part of the deal is the worst, but I think probably the biggest slap was that he was allowed to leave. So he was just like he was staying at a really bad motel.
He did jail, whatever that is, but Holiday Inn, great. So I've been raped over and over again because Alex Acosta didn't have the balls or the courage to protect us.
A few steps, a smile, and a wave to the deputy at the door. We watched Jeffrey Epstein walk out of jail, but only his attorneys heard from him.
He's very happy that his jail sentence is over and he can begin a new chapter in his life.
Palm Beach billionaire Jeffrey Epstein is waking up in his mansion this morning after serving just 13 months of his 18-month sentence for paying underage girls for sex. Epstein will serve 12 months house arrest at his Palm Beach home. The 54-year-old will be confined to his home except for work and other activities approved by his probation officer.
In 2009, after Jeffrey Epstein got out of jail, victim's attorney, Brad Edwards, asked me to follow Jeffrey to see if he was abiding by his probation. So about a block and a half east of Jeffrey's house, the street here, you get a good view of who would come in and out of his gate. There was a couple of occasions where we knew Jeffrey was hiding in the car when he left. He would violate his probation almost on a daily basis. There's 11 pages here of just different violations. I think I myself documented 66 different days that he violated his probation. On this particular day, Epstein left his house and drove to South Beach where he met with Alan Dershowitz at a hotel. This is pictures of his bodyguard, Igor, outside waiting for them to come out. That's his Escalade. I had contacted the probation and said, do you know where Jeffrey is? And she said, yeah, he's home at his house. He said, no, he's not. He's in a hotel down in Miami. I waited outside for Jeffrey to leave. Just got out of my car with my camera and I said, hey, smile. He would go to New York, to his island. He would go to the airport, jump in his helicopter. Who knows where he went without telling anybody. Every time I brought the probation office a case, they kept telling me the same thing. What would you like us to do? He's a celebrity. I mean, just think about this. You have a pedophile out on probation. To violate probation in the state of Florida is illegal, except for Jeffrey Epstein.
In 2002, Jeffrey's office asked me if I wanted to go on a trip to Africa. I was reluctant to go because I was traumatized on the island, but I developed the sort of mentality that, like, as long as I didn't talk about the abuse, it didn't really happen. That was something that, I'd kind of been conditioned to from my childhood. Just, there was so many tragedies and traumas that happened and none of it was ever talked about. So he landed on one of the phone calls and said, this is a great opportunity and we'd love to have you. I went from just the masseuse to being asked to be a personal assistant on this trip. So I was blinded by the opportunity of it. I hadn't gone anywhere really, and to go to Africa was like a dream come true. I flew from LA to New York. The plane was ready on the tarmac when I got there, and I took a seat. Then our guests arrived. It was Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker. I was blown away, like, oh my God, it was surreal. The trip was about the AIDS organization that Clinton had started. This trip to Africa is probably the single most amazing moment of my life. And I remember having this false belief that the abuse had stopped because nothing had happened in Africa, thinking that maybe it just wasn't going to happen anymore. But after the Africa trip, the abuse started all over again, and it never stopped after that. It never once occurred to me that I was being paid for anything more than being a masseuse. I really kept it separate. I was there for a job, and this man was also sexually assaulting me on the side. It was two separate things for me. I definitely didn't have the mature mindset of a normal 21, 22, 23-year-old. My mom had fled an extremely abusive relationship, and so when we fled, I was taking care of my sister. Years later, my then 17-year-old sister was living with me. On one random weekend, Jeffrey and Ghislaine flew to LA, and they just invited me for lunch. Ghislaine was like, bring her along, and it never occurred to me that this was maybe a bad idea. I never thought that he was doing this to other people. I really didn't. So I brought my sister with me, and it was decided right then and there that they were going to send her to school in Spain to study language and to pursue her dream to be a translator. It wasn't until April of 2005, almost 2 years later, that I learned that he was also doing this to my sister. She came back home with an eating disorder. She was rail thin and looked horrible, and she confessed that Jeffrey had been sexually assaulting her basically since they sent her to school. I never knew until she came home that day. My sister thought that Jeffrey was the most powerful man she'd ever meet, and knew that he was friends with celebrities and wealthy people. And there was an altercation that took place in Jeffrey's Paris apartment with Harvey Weinstein. My sister came running from the room, freaked out at whatever he said and did in there. And immediately Harvey Weinstein's assistant got involved,
trying to remedy the situation by sending flowers and apology notes. Jeffrey and Harvey are both very disgusting people who used their power to manipulate and abuse. I let Jeffrey know that I knew what he had done to my sister and that I didn't want to, have anything to do with him anymore. And he told me that if I thought I could get anywhere in life without his help, that I was wrong, and basically hung up on me after that, and we never spoke again. I still feel an immense amount of guilt because I was responsible for her, and I let her move to a different country under the pretense that she was going to get this amazing education, and she came back traumatized at the same hands of the person who was traumatizing me for the last 3 years, and how could she not be angry? I would be angry. There's definitely still a lot of guilt and anger that I have and feel that I don't know will ever go away.
Jeffrey found out what your weakness was. When I was 14, I'd been raped. That one rape will affect you for the rest of your life. Part of being sexually trafficked is you are coerced right from the start. Once you've opened that door, they then shut that door, so you can't get back out. Jeffrey put me up in his apartment in New York. He gave me enough money to buy food. He was organizing my transportation. He was going to be paying for my education. My whole life was based through Jeffrey.
すごい
It was 8.5 months that I had Jeffrey in my life. This is as an abusive relationship physically and mentally as it gets. But I left and I disappeared. So when I fled New York, I fled for my life. You're either gonna live or die. That's simple.
Jeffrey Epstein, after he got released on probation, he goes to New York. The first thing he does is have a party. All these people showing up at his house. The Prince is there. Woody Allen's there.
After everybody knew a large number of underage girls were abused, people continued to associate themselves with him.
I'm just looking to get my life back, going to my philanthropy. I must have given away my $14 million last year. I've collected some of the world's smartest people. I've funded some of the world's greatest cutting-edge science. I mean, I have a bunch of Nobel Prize winners come here and they end up getting funded for some things that it's difficult to get funded for. Quantum computing, for example, evolutionary code theory.
Mm-hmm. So you're not engaging in any sort of legal massage or?
No, afraid not. Most of the scientists who come here are in the 70s and 80s, but probably they're not that attractive.
Epstein managed to maintain a very good reputation in many circles by being a very generous donor to universities, to research centers. She would show up at academic conferences, at medical conventions, and not only write them a check, but want to be part of the discussion.
It was really troubling how quickly he was just, brought back into the fold in his world, and the celebrities that felt like it was just fine, to socialize with him and be in public with him. It felt that there was just really no consequence and people didn't care about his behavior. It was really disheartening.
I think that is one of the tragedies of the case. As Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to just resume business as usual, his victims had struggled. They had this horrible experience. Nobody had taken them seriously. And, for years, I think a lot of them struggled. And still probably to this day are still struggling.
3ヶ月以上浮かないと1行書いて、頭の中でもう演技を組み立てて感じ。
Being so young at 14, being introduced to Jeffrey Epstein, having this sexual relationship with a guy that gives me money, it was too much. I just dropped out of high school. It wasn't pretty. It was, drugs, money, sex, fast life. For a very long time, I went down that road. And that did lead me into incarceration. It was a dark time, for sure.
I started going down this really depressing road. I hated myself. I wanted to inflict pain on myself. So I would just take like a knife and I'd just cut it right here on my arm. If I was the one doing the pain, then it wasn't anybody else doing it to me. I wanted to know that I could always have control of a situation because that situation that I was in made me feel like I was helpless. Things only got worse after that. I was doing drugs. Started out with pills and then mushrooms, acid, heroin. Got to a point I'm just gonna kill myself doing these drugs, and why would it matter?
There's days when I don't get out of bed and I don't feel like I'm going to make it.
I lost a lot of friends. I had to quit a lot of places because I was being bullied at work. I struggled. Even though I was a minor when I met him, I wasn't protected. My name was thrown out there.
Patreva to the movie, Himura Yuki.
They released my name. They released my pictures. They released a lot of personal information. I was a victim, just like the other girls. I was preyed upon by Jeffrey Epstein the same way the others were. I do think about the girls that I brought, that I recruited. And I think this is probably the hardest part because of the guilt. That's what destroys me every day.
Being lent out and being abused by Epstein, I was in a bad way. I was very scared and I was very alone. And I knew that I had to get out. I didn't know what that opportunity was going to be when I started packing those bags, but I really felt like this was my break. I'm in Australia now, and I have been for 17 years since I escaped from Jeffrey Epstein. It was 2002, just before my 19th birthday. I'd been with Jeffrey just over 2 years at that point. We went for a snorkeling day on his island, and Bjorn's like, I want to talk to you about something kind of serious. And I thought, oh God, what are they going to ask me to do now? And she goes, well, Jeffrey and I, we want to have a baby. We want you to have the baby for us. But it's not really going to be your kid because we need you to sign over that child's rights to us. It was gut-wrenching. I knew I had to get out. But I was afraid to say no. So I said, okay, well, you guys did promise me that I'd get an education. So could you at least let me get my massage certificate? And we'll do it. And not even a few weeks later, Jeffrey gives me these tickets booked to Thailand. And he says, happy birthday, this is for you, you're gonna go get a certificate. So I get to Thailand, and I'm like, I have an opportunity here to escape. I've got to tell somebody what's going on, I've got to leave. Nearly immediately, I met Robert. We fell in love. It was the first moment in my life where I said, I can take control of my own life. He got on one knee, he proposed, just like that. He said, come back to Australia with me. 7 days later, we were married in a Chiang Mai Buddhist temple in the mountains. It was the happiest moment of my life. I called Jeffrey. I didn't know what to say or how to say it, but I said, I just blurted out, Jeffrey, I just got married. And I'm not coming back. He said, what do you mean?
てかすごい早いよね。コンピューターウイルスとかだから。
And I'm scared to death.
広角機動隊
I
の
said, Jeffrey, I've started a new life.
そのスマホがスマホみたいなパーソナルデバイスが出て。
And he hung up the phone.
早いよ、90年とかだから。
I felt free. I mean, I immediately felt like the chains broke off.
パソコン、マイコンはね。
It was a powerful moment for me.
持ってたと思うけど。
But one of the first things I said to my husband was, Robbie, enough's enough. We've got to do something. He needs to be brought to justice. And I said, okay, let's hold him accountable. And that's when we decided we're going to go get him. We're going to go get them all.
We're back in the video record at 12:02 p.m.
Let's talk about Django 102, Virginia Roberts. Do you know Virginia Roberts?
So she's again who?
Virginia Roberts.
Can you spell it?
Common spelling. Virginia, like the state.
Can you spell it for me, please?
Roberts.
What's the last name? How's it spelled?
Roberts, I believe.
Isn't it true that you and Ghislaine Maxwell celebrated her 16th birthday with her and had sex with her on that day?
Form, compound, confusing, argumentative, harassing.
I'd like to answer that question. But today, I'm going to have to assert my Sixth Amendment rights, my Fifth Amendment rights.
Is it true that you forced Virginia Roberts to have sex with numerous friends of yours?
Are you kidding?
The first time I decided to go public, it was because I gave birth to this beautiful baby girl. It kind of made me realize what I had been through was still happening to other people out there. It wasn't just me. And I looked at my husband and I said, Robbie, we can't just sit by and be silent anymore. We've got to do something about it. I was sexually abused by Prince Andrew. Someone had to put their hand up and say, like, he can't just get away with this. I first met Prince Andrew March 10th, 2001 in London at Gillen's townhouse. He he knocked on the door, he came inside Gilan's townhouse, and we're sitting there having tea. Gilan has this favorite guessing game that she does. She goes to Prince Andrew, how old do you think Virginia is? And he said 17. And she's like, oh, you're right. And, they like made a little joke about it. And he's like, oh, my daughters aren't far from your age. My daughter's a little bit younger than you. We went out for the night, Club Tramp in London. And he dances and he's profusely sweating over me and it was disgusting. We get back to the townhouse and we go upstairs. I have this little yellow Kodak camera and I asked Jeffrey to take a photo of me and Prince Andrew together. Gilan's literally just like right behind me. Gilan tells me, you're gonna have to do for him what you do for Jeffrey. And it hit me. And right after that photo was taken, I was sexually abused by Prince Andrew for the first time.
A former prostitute claims she was just 17 when she allegedly had sexual relations with Prince Andrew.
I've been called a serial prostitute, a bad mom, a serial liar, a drug addict, every name under the sun. The whole Prince Andrew thing, it was just kaboom. And it went from being a harrowing story about trafficking and abuse to completely Prince Andrew. I wasn't Prince Andrew's prostitute because I was trafficked to him and I was a kid.
My client, Virginia Giuffre, was trafficked by Epstein almost 30 times when she was under the age of 18, both nationally and internationally. Virginia came forward publicly in a filing in the Crimes Victims' Rights Act case. In that filing, she made public some of the individuals who had abused her when she was being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. One of those individuals was Alan Dershowitz.
I assure you, I never had sex with Virginia Roberts. Let me state categorically, I never had sex with an underage person in my life. Even when I was an underage boy, I never had sex with an underage girl. I never had sex with anyone related to Jeffrey Epstein. I challenge Virginia Roberts to come on your show, look in the camera, and say the following words. I accuse Alan Dershowitz of having had sex with me on 6 or 7 occasions. She has never been willing to accuse me in public, so please accuse me on this show. I challenge you.
I was with Alan Dershowitz multiple times. At least 6 that I can remember. Well, I was trafficked to Alan Dershowitz from Epstein. Epstein made me, essentially, forced me to have sex with him. Every time I was trafficked was at Epstein or Gilan's behest. He's denied being with me. Is one of us telling the truth? Yes. Is that person me? Yes.
I came forward in 2016 when the US election started to happen. This was completely unplanned. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are both up for election, and both candidates for US president had affiliations with Jeffrey Epstein. So I went to almost every single news channel, British media, American media. I tried to tell them. I told them who Jeffrey Epstein was, what he did. I told them who Ghislaine was. No one would listen. No one would hear my voice in 2016.
This is a moment in time unlike any other. With the Me Too movement, women are feeling the ability to tell what happened to them, some of the worst moments they've lived, and tell it publicly. And that is powerful, and it is affecting everything, and people are looking for justice.
I remember watching the TV about the Me Too movement and thinking, okay, like, we're next.
We don't need to feel ashamed for having, survived these things. Actually, talking about them, bring them into the light and finding support from each other is a huge way towards healing.
There's definitely strength in numbers, and I feel like women feel way more comfortable to come forward when they know that they're not alone. I think we have an unspoken bond that many people won't ever understand. Times have changed in a year such that these accusations will be listened to in a different way.
It's an explosive investigative series by the Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown, connecting the dots between President Trump's Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta and what the Miami Herald calls the deal of a lifetime that was given to accuse pedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will please come to order. This morning we're holding a confirmation hearing on the nomination of Alexander Acosta to serve as United States Secretary of Labor.
I did not hear anything about Epstein until President Trump nominated Acosta to be Labor Secretary. And so as I was digging into Acosta's background, I came upon information about the Epstein case. I was shocked. I'd like to ask you about this. Federal prosecutors detailed their findings in an 82-page prosecution memo and a 53-page indictment, but Epstein was never indicted. And then there's a quote, this agreement, the agreement you described, will not be made part of any public record, the deal between Epstein and Acosta says.
At the end of the day, based on the evidence, professionals within a prosecutor's office decide that a plea that guarantees that someone goes to jail and that guarantees other outcomes is a good thing. And so
was that a consensus decision in your office?
It was a
アキラ
broadly
とか
held
パトレイ
decision.
バーとかを今作れる感じしない
It
よ
was a
ね
secret deal, as we now know. I thought the outrageous nature of the allegations might lead to a vote against him.
よくも悪くもオタクカルチャ
I want
ー
to thank President
大
Trump,
生産
Vice President Pence,
ちゃん
and
と
the members of the Senate
大人
for the
向
privilege of
け
serving
にア
as
ニメを
Secretary
作
of
っ
Labor.
てるアキラはな参加出てる星間もよ
Karen and Chris, you've got to come take a look at this order. Judge Mara has issued his summary judgment ruling. What Judge Mara has ruled is that the federal government entered into a conspiracy with Jeffrey Epstein to violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act.
アニメ長いからさそれ
This is just fantastic. That is great.
Congratulations.
All right.
Well deserved.
All right. There is now in place a federal order that the federal government, under Alexander Acosta's direction, not only failed to inform victims, but actively misled them. That means that there may be a new hearing in front of a federal judge where these victims have a right to express their opposition to this deal. And a judge could decide it was a contract that was illegal from the outset. Epstein has no immunity. The federal government has the right to prosecute you and the right to prosecute your co-conspirators.
ロボットアニメかと
There
思
was
い
this
きや
elation
ずっ
on
と
behalf of
人
the
間
victims
ドラ
that, and look, we won. We went up against the government and Jeffrey Epstein, and we won. We proved that you conspired against us, the victims.
When I heard Judge Mara did rule in our favor, I just felt very accomplished. We've been fighting for this for a long time. Just to have it in words, your rights were violated, period. It was like, okay, now something's happening.
It became clear that many of the crimes Jeffrey Epstein had committed in Florida originated in New York, and that he likely had committed these crimes in New York. At this stage, the New York investigation was underway.
A federal investigation this morning shining some new light on a controversial plea deal for a wealthy investor accused of molesting dozens of underage girls.
This decision to investigate reflects the Me Too movement, potentially touching on the Trump administration and many other powerful people. And most important, of course, it impacts the women who took the risk to come forward.
Now New York's finally showing an interest. My clients were all on board and had been all on board for 10 years.
I had heard that there was an investigation by the FBI in New York and the U.S. Attorney in New York. Even though it felt as though the victims were completely abandoned by the entire criminal justice system, I never gave up over the years, hoping that some measure of justice would eventually come to the victims.
I had a pretty good inkling that something was going to happen because the FBI, along with detectives from NYPD, were down here in Palm Beach interviewing numerous people over the last 3 months.
I was contacted by the FBI. They told me that they had this investigation going on in New York and they wanted to get, as much information as they could. I told them that they needed to look out for their victims. I told them that if they were going to do this thing, they needed to really do it.
I was so angry that I just wanted to, make him pay. So at that point, I reached out, which led to a 5-hour meeting with the FBI, and they flew out to LA to meet with me, and that was super intense, but it finally felt like we were getting somewhere.
Having interviewed with some authorities, so we knew they were closing in. We were really excited. I never ever thought that he would be held accountable.
Breaking news overnight, Jeffrey Epstein arrested at a New York area airport.
Jeffrey Epstein was arrested at New Jersey's Teterboro Airport after returning on a flight from France.
The 66-year-old hedge fund manager was arrested on federal charges related to sex trafficking. He has a bond hearing scheduled for Monday in New York.
When I found out that he was arrested, I was like, oh my God, finally, he's going to pay for everything that he has done. I'm going to New York, even though I didn't want to see him. I'm going to see him now that he is in shackles, he is in an orange jumpsuit. He is being treated like every criminal would be treated. This has got to be it. This is when it's going to happen. They're going to start digging into his life and start pulling out this spider web of people that were related to it. Oh, he's going to jail. This is it.
Federal prosecutors allege that between 2002 and 2005, Epstein paid underage girls as young as 14 to have sex with him at his campus.
He's a villain, that's it. And we're here to get rid of him.
I'm Jeff Berman, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Today, we announce the unsealing of sex trafficking charges against Jeffrey Epstein.
I remember my lawyer calling me and saying, "You're not going to believe this. Do you have anywhere to sit down?"
And while the charged conduct is from a number of years ago, it is still profoundly important to the many alleged victims, now young women. They deserve their day in court.
I looked at my phone, and then I looked at my phone again. And then I looked at my phone, and then I was like, no.
I mean, there was a flood of emotions. I was confused. I was happy. Tears of joy were streaming down my face.
Epstein is charged in a two-count indictment. First, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, and second, the substantive crime of sex trafficking of underage girls.
It somewhat restored my faith in the criminal justice system that was lost by the way the prosecutors in Florida treated the victims and treated the case back in 2006 and 7.
The charges are very serious, and they carry with them a maximum sentence of 45 years in jail, which to someone of Epstein's age is basically a life sentence.
I just could not believe it. It's all kind of just exploded all of a sudden. But at the same time, I also still knew and believed his power and ability to get himself out of things. I was still kind of wondering how it was going to go and whether or not they were going to really be able to build a case and to prosecute him.
Oh, shut up.
Somebody must have tipped them off. Something else.
New raid video showing federal agents as they bust open the door of his 7-story, $77 million home on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Inside, investigators found hundreds, if not thousands, of female nude photographs.
I think that he would have been a little bit more careful, and I don't think that there's just one set of photos. It makes me wonder if there's photos of myself. What do you do with those photos? Do you show your friends? Do you use them to get off? All those thoughts crossed my mind.
Knowing that he had in fact kept tokens like this from women that he had, abused over the years, that really got to me.
Jeffrey Epstein had no clue that this case was coming down, that there was any investigation whatsoever into him in New York, or he never would have come back to the country.
It was interesting. Not long after he's arrested, everyone who had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, suddenly, no one really knew him. Suddenly, we really weren't friends. I knew him in an ancillary way.
Presidents Trump and Clinton have quickly moved to put some distance between themselves and Epstein.
I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan.
He has not spoken to Epstein in well over a decade and has never been to Little St. James Island, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, or his residence in Florida.
Flight logs obtained indicate that former President Bill Clinton was on Epstein's private jet at least 26 times between 2001 and 2003.
Bill Clinton has been on that island. I saw Bill Clinton sitting with Jeffrey on the living room porch.
I remember having a dinner with Clinton. He was there, and I never saw him do anything improper. I wish, he would just complain about, I was there, so what? Who cares? I didn't see anything going on. For years, there had been a known affiliation and a friendship between Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. And then, of course, there were the allegations from Virginia Giuffre. And these stories had dogged him for years. So he decides, I'll confront them head on. So he sits down with the BBC.
Look, I can tell you categorically, I don't remember meeting her at all. I do not remember a photograph being taken. And I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact whatever.
So I'm sitting outside and I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm watching it on my tablet. I mean, I wanted to throw my tablet in the pool.
I have no recollection of ever meeting her.
As a victim, I think one thing that we ask for is some acknowledgement and some remorse. This guy didn't have any remorse at all. His arrogance about it. I mean, the whole I don't sweat thing.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time.
This guy was profusely sweating all over me, and I don't remember her. I've never been upstairs at Ellen's townhouse. How do you know that's upstairs?
She provided a photo of the two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo?
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't. Because I have absolutely no memory of that photograph ever being taken.
I didn't expect him to put his hand up and say I'm guilty. I didn't. But some form of remorse or acknowledgement would have been better.
I think it's been universally agreed it was one of the worst mea culpas ever known to man. I mean, if people didn't think he was guilty before, after his interview, I think people thought that something had happened. So I think that kind of backfired on him.
ジェシビ使ってる？
めっちゃ使ってますよ。
いや、俺はさ、カフェ、ジェシビで、音楽、電車、全部ジェシビ。
私だって動画、クリニック、美容院、全部 JCB ね、私でしょ？
いや、俺だな。ジェシビ。
After Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, all of a sudden the FBI now and this task force, they interviewed me. They had me look at a large series, it must have been 60 or 70 photos of people. Then they showed me one of Virginia Roberts. But it was a current photo. I couldn't identify it. But I was told to check a photo that had emerged out of all of this investigative work. And that photo is a photo of Prince Andrew with a young blonde girl. As soon as I saw her, that was the girl that he was kind of like grinding against at the pool. She was at that time wearing a bikini bottom. That's it. But I absolutely can tell you that the photo of her in the picture, which is her when she is, I think, 17, that was Virginia Roberts.
Epstein should have been behind bars years ago. But unfortunately, Secretary of Labor Alex Acosta cut Epstein a sweetheart deal while Acosta was a U.S. attorney in Florida in 2008. I am calling on Secretary Acosta to resign.
Let me start by reiterating that I'm pleased that the New York prosecution is moving forward. They brought these charges based on new evidence against Jeffrey Epstein, who is now a registered sex offender. And this is a very, very good thing.
It's quite unbelievable that Mr. Acosta could get up there with a straight face and talk about how he's happy that new charges are brought by the Southern District of New York, which means essentially Mr. Acosta is admitting that it's wonderful that another district office was doing a better investigation than his office did and found more victims than he did.
I called the president this morning. I told him that I thought the right thing was to step aside. I do not think it is right and fair for this administration's Labor Department to have Epstein as the focus.
This is just totally a bunch of bullshit.
It would be selfish for me to stay in this position.
He knows that we know now that this case was never an ultimatum to Jeffrey Epstein. That this was an indictment that the federal government had against him that they decided not to go forward with. Now I know why he resigned today, because he knew within 24 hours the real people that knew the truth were going to come forward and say that, Mr. Acosta, you're full of shit. That's not what happened. Excuse my French.
A Manhattan judge is expected to decide whether Jeffrey Epstein should be released on bail ahead of his federal trial. Epstein pleaded not guilty. His attorneys say he's ready to post up to $100 million bail.
And you have victims who say that they are frightened if he is out.
I was able to fly to New York to be present at the court hearings. I definitely thought he would get out on bond, and just because of how much money he has. And it was just like, that's exactly what happened the first time.
Well, I didn't even know if I could get into the court because I wasn't sure how it worked. But I just wanted there to be somebody there to represent the survivors.
David, I think we should take that. Let's go. We're gonna try to get in. Let's go.
And they want to encourage others to come forward. That's why they're here.
That day was crazy. Media attention, and it was something that I never dealt with before. It was just a lot to take in all in one day.
I was terrified. I had never experienced something like that. I was actually like holding Courtney's hand because I was like, I need to feel some kind of like comfort right now.
Me and Michelle, definitely, it's like soul sisters. We're victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and here we are. There's no more hiding, you know, it's no more Jane Doe. Like, I'm Courtney Wild, and I was sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. Michelle said the same thing, and it was just overwhelming. But there's power in more than one person.
I want him to look at me, and I want it to be like, do you remember me? Do you remember my face? Do you remember anything about me? Of course you don't remember me, because there was hundreds like me. You don't remember me, but I'll remember you for the rest of my life. That's something that I have to remember. So I want you to take a good look at my face right now, and I want you to remember the people that are going to put you in prison for the rest of your life. You know, my heart's starting to race, like, oh my God, this is the moment. Like, I have kind of dreaded 10 years, 15 years. I'm going to see him, and I haven't seen him since he was laying out on a table, masturbating and going to town on himself. And, you know, like, that's the last time I've actually seen him in person.
Stay back.
No, step on the steps.
I was sitting in the courtroom, and I was so upset. I was crying. It was super overwhelming. He had like a bald spot on the back of his head. He was in like the jumpsuit. I was like, this is unbelievable.
got to look at him in the face in the courtroom and say, you know, I was sexually abused by Jeffrey when I was 14, and to please not give him bond and stuff like that. And even though it was such a short period of time, it was just a short statement I got to say, you know, he still had to look at me and hear me say that.
His attorneys were offering hundreds of millions of dollars for bond money, which should ensure that he's going to return.
It started at $500 million. They were making offers to the court in order to try to convince the judge to let him out. He'll give all of his wealth, whatever it takes to get him out.
But then the prosecutors presented additional evidence.
When they broke into the home and they found child pornography in his safe, they also found a number of other things, diamonds, passports that were false.
The diamonds, passport, it looks like an escape plan. He's had an escape plan forever.
Whatever, he's not getting out. And this means he'll probably spend the rest of his life in jail.
We're thrilled today with a ruling by Judge Berman. Only by taking away the freedom of Jeffrey Epstein can we restore the freedom of these victims.
No bail for Jeffrey Epstein. The judge agreed with the government that Epstein presents a danger to the community and also an extreme risk of flight.
He also talked a lot about just the community can't be safe. He was a danger to the community. He was very moved by the statements by the two victims.
This is a guy who manipulated, threatened, bought his way in and out of trouble. And now, for the first time in a jail cell in Manhattan, it looks like there was no way to buy his way out.
教科書とかだけ一般とかと思うんで扱うの。小学校と違う。
With everything coming out again and having to go through and relive it, I'm scared. I'm scared to be dragged to the media again. It's just been a roller coaster. I've been up and down every day. I've been sick to my stomach. I've cried a lot. I mean, I think we can all assume with his reach and his planes and his wealth, like he could very well walk out the front door and we could never see him again. And I'm hoping that after this time, and that it's the final time and that he actually does not get out.
唯一の例外が学校の教科書で、一般とか当販を通さないから。Amazon でも買えない。
I was laying on the sofa and kind of drifting and out of sleep, and my husband came and sat next to me, and he woke me up, like, you know, in a way that I knew something was wrong. And he said, I have some hard news.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Epstein took his own life while behind bars here in New York City while facing charges of sex trafficking.
Committed suicide? What? How is that possible?
What we know is at some point this morning, the Bureau of Prisons and prison officials found Jeffrey Epstein in his cell. Apparently, he had hanged himself.
I was kind of in shock. It didn't hit me for maybe a couple hours. And then I got really, really angry that I couldn't face him and tell him what he'd done to me in my life.
His body in that van you see there, seen heading for the medical examiner's office. It is a stunning turn of events for a man who lived a life of exceptional wealth with extremely powerful people in his orbit.
It is inconceivable that in a prison, a federal prison that housed terrorists and El Chapo, that had cameras, that had guards everywhere, that something could go wrong and harm could come to Jeffrey Epstein. Inconceivable. Reports indicated that he tied his bed sheet around his neck and strangled himself. It's a federal prison, notoriously underfunded, something of a hellhole, and it's revealed that the guards were sleeping, the cameras weren't working. Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Honestly, I felt so devastated that once again he had, you know, managed to escape any kind of accountability. That's how it felt. Like people just didn't care enough to make sure that he was alive to go to trial.
There's no justice in this. There was just so much more to be said that's never going to be said. And that's sad. I didn't know how to react to it. I felt sad immediately. And not to say that, like, he didn't do bad things, not to say that he didn't deserve something terrible to happen to him. I just don't think that was the ending that anybody wanted.
Before I begin, I'd like to briefly address news from the Manhattan Correctional Center over the weekend regarding Jeffrey Epstein. We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation.
If you want to know how he could slip through the cracks on this, the New York's Metropolitan Correction Center used to be called the Tombs. It's a notoriously, harsh place. It's understaffed and largely staffed by not the smartest people. He knew his life was done. He wanted to kill himself, and he killed himself the first chance he got.
I think it's just typical of the whole Jeffrey Epstein story. Even in death, he kept the controversy alive.
Wild rumors and theories about how Jeffrey Epstein died on the federal government's watch is breeding online.
I think it's the never-ending story. Did he kill himself? Was he killed? Was there a hideout? Did, one of these powerful men pay a prison guard to kill him? I don't know.
This case is ripe for conspiracy theories. That's part of the story here. There's so many weird sort of connections.
Conspiracy theorists have claimed that Epstein's death wasn't a suicide or it was faked. Other Epstein theories floating online. How convenient now for the princes and politicians and other powerful people Epstein mingled with that he's dead.
I'm sure many people wanted him dead. He had a lot of information on a lot of people, a lot of blackmail videos and pictures.
If you look here, the limestone, inside the house, behind like a space like that, they have cameras and they have them everywhere. Jeffrey took me into a room which is a little bit back further than this window, and it's leaded, and it had all the computers and all these monitors, like the old-fashioned TV monitors stacked.
I'm looking at the monitors and I'm like, that's my room. That's the massage room. That's my shower. That's my toilet. That's everyone else's toilet in the house. That's everyone else's shower in the house. That's every single corner of that house was monitored. He was watching everybody all the time. This was a blackmail scheme. All those powerful people abusing underage girls. When he told me people owe me favors and I will never get caught, I can get away with things, he meant it.
I think that he would take a lot of people down. This wasn't just a ring for Jeffrey Epstein. This was an international sex trafficking ring. This has reached all over the world. He is a very small piece in a
関係ない髪の毛だからそのふわっとしてなくてそれは思想じゃんあなたの思想は勝手に持ってる関係ないからその思想と動いてねえわ
He hires a renowned forensic expert to take another look at the autopsy.
日版か盗犯なんだここ狙ったのが甘い
A call came in from Dr. Michael Barton, who was representing the family, specifically the brother, Mr. Mark Epstein. I then received a copy of the autopsy report and discussed things with Dr. Barton at great length. There was no evidence at all to indicate that he had jumped or leaped from the bunk. I came to learn that there were fractures of the hyoid bone, which is a delicate U-shaped bone located high in the neck directly beneath the mandible, the lower jaw. I have here, from a totally unrelated case, of course, a hyoid bone. Now, there is some soft tissue still attached. On Jeffrey Epstein, 3 fractures were found. The horn of the hyoid bone on the left side, and then directly beneath on Jeffrey Epstein, there were fractures of the thyroid cartilage, and then on the right side of the thyroid cartilage. You do not get those 3 fractures with a suicidal hanging of someone leaning forward. So where, again, is the force that would have been required to produce those fractures from kneeling forward? I can say I've never seen it myself in all of my autopsies. I would say to have these 3 fractures in that kind of a suicidal hanging would be extremely rare, extremely rare.
What really took this tragedy to another level, in my view, was when he moved his money over to the Virgin Islands in his will.
Jeffrey Epstein signed a will 2 days before he committed suicide. At that time, he knew he was committing suicide, but I would presume his lawyers didn't know that.
It made it much more difficult for the victims to get restitution. And in my view, it sort of underscored his evilness, his venality. It basically showed that he had no remorse whatsoever. He didn't think he did anything wrong. That just says it all about Jeffrey Epstein. It was a fuck you to the victims. Like, he had no sort of remorse about victims.
Victims, certain things have been taken from them forever. They'll never get the satisfaction of seeing him in jail for life. But there will come a point in time where they're able to prove that they were victimized, that they were harmed by the victimization, and that they should be compensated for it. But they're never going to be made whole because you just can't ever take back what happened to them.
Epstein's lawyers wanted to dismiss the case. You can't try a dead guy. But the judge wasn't going to let that happen. The judge was going to let some of the victims have their day in court.
Up to 30 women are expected to accept a New York judge's invitation to address the hearing before he moves to dismiss the criminal sex trafficking case against Epstein.
The invite to the hearing was all very last minute. As emotional as this has all been for me, it's also ignited sort of this dragon, if you will, in me that I feel the need to speak my truth and to have my voice heard.
More than a dozen alleged victims of convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein finally had their day in court.
We deserved our day in court. I think it was a very cowardly thing for him to do. He escaped justice.
I was so touched by the strength of the women that were there, getting up and sharing their experiences, so many for the first time. It was a very cathartic experience to be there.
Judge Berman, he changed my life. For the first time, I actually saw someone in a position of power that actually had any form of respect for us, and he listened. And that's all I ever wanted, was for someone to listen, and for someone to hear me.
Judge Berman gave me back something that I never thought was possible. He gave me back a piece of myself that was missing for so long. Hugging those girls in court. It was beautiful. We cried, we laughed, we hugged, and we all had each other's backs that day in court.
The way that Judge Berman treated these victims is going to be the model for how victims should be treated. I think that it's going to go down in history as the most important case on behalf of crime victims in U.S. history to date.
It makes me sick to my stomach that there's perpetrators out there that obviously helped him in many ways for a very long time, and they're still out there. It gives nobody justice, and it leaves a lot of unanswered questions. It's also pretty upsetting to see how many lives he's devastated, and to see how long this went on for, and nobody did anything about it.
It's incredibly scary to come forward against someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who's a billionaire, who has friends in very high places, who has intimidated them, who has abused them, and to stand up many years later and to say, this was wrong, it shouldn't have happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to anybody else, is just an incredible thing to witness. Okay, let's see. I felt completely defeated. My life was threatened, my work was threatened, my career was jeopardized completely. I've pretty much been on a journey for 20 years of not doing my art, of not painting, and I was just trying to survive. And then I began again painting because I was tired of being afraid. I felt like I wanted to expose the monsters, and I just needed to get that out. And so this is an illustration. Basically, it's my diagram for the FBI because I want them to see what I told them all those years ago. And it's a version of Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, which is basically just like Dante's Inferno, portraying heaven, hell, and earth. This is our lovely Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a pill, a hard pill to swallow, and she's the property of the FBI in this drawing. I put Epstein here with his little UFO on a NASA tower because Epstein was given a free ride by our government. And yeah, that makes me angry. So I'm actually working on something new right now. I'm drawing the other Epstein survivors because it empowers me to provide them with strength. And basically it's just about strength in numbers at this stage. We need each other to get through this. This is Annie, my sister, and she's holding a paper doll. The thing that's going to bind them together is they're all going to be holding these paper dolls, and the paper dolls represent the children who have not come forward, and we don't know what happened to them.
I think this was just one chapter in my life. For a long time, I didn't want to think about myself as a victim. And it's interesting because I've gone on to work as a therapist. I do think the fact that I had this experience has helped me to understand how people respond to certain situations and to be the kind of therapist that I am. This is Courtney. Courtney's very strong. She's definitely been through a lot, and I admire her so much. My life is definitely still a struggle for everything that I went through with Jeffrey. However, it is kind of come to an end. It's a good thing, it's a bittersweet thing because it's over, and I can kind of work through the healing process now. And this is Michelle. Michelle has like a really fun spirit, I feel. She has a great sense of humor, and also she's beautiful, and I wanted to depict her as I see her, so.
This isn't over. I really hope that the police, the FBI, the government, just do your job. I go to work. I do my job every single day for the rest of my life. You're given that position and that power to make things right, to do the right thing. So do the right thing. That's it. It's plain and simple, you know. Take them down. Take everybody down.
That's Sarah. She's my favorite. I love this girl. She's precious. I feel a very special bond with her. I love her like a sister.
I'll never get to see Jeffrey again. And I wanted him to see the woman I've become. And that he didn't break me. And I will fight till my last breath on earth. I'm here today to tell you that it stops here, and it stops now. And I am here for my fight for the rest of my life will be to make sure that no woman will ever feel ashamed to come forward.
This is Virginia. And I didn't know that Virginia used a butterfly as a symbol, which obviously makes sense, a symbol of freedom, leaving the cocoon. But I didn't know that when I drew this. I found that kind of interesting.
Epstein did not act alone. So my next step is holding other people accountable. The people that were involved, the people that actually participated. There are so many of them out there. None of them have been held accountable. We were kids being trafficked under their eyes, under their nose. They knew exactly what was going on, and they didn't say anything about it. So stop worrying about saving your own hide and help us. That's all we're asking for. Stop. What are you doing in there? What are you doing? The monsters are still out there, and they're still abusing other people. Why they have not been named and shamed yet is beyond me.
Maxwell.
"君はいつも父さんに薬を運んでいたのかい?"